All right, everyone. It's time for a philosophical topic here. It's a slow news day because there's nothing in the news other than COVID anyway, and I'm tired of talking about that all the time, except for the political element thereupon. But I figured I would cover this topic now that I'm 32. Uh, it's a topic that, when you're younger, when you hear people say, like, life begins at 30, you haven't lived until you turn 30. When I was, like, younger, like when I was a teenager or something, I'd hear that and I would think it's basically people that are old coping. I would figure that they're just sort of lying to themselves, trying to cheer themselves up, or they're trying to, like, be haughty and put themselves up over people who are younger. And I figured, like, basically you peak at like 20 or something like that. You're always 21 in your mind, just old enough to have a beer. But actually, it's true. At least in my case, and my anecdote is a little bit biased, I think, because you got to understand, I spent most of my 20s smoking cigarettes and doing drugs and being poor. It isn't really until I was 28 that I started generating any real income. I was doing college jobs, odd jobs, a little bit of sort of independent work before that, but not much. It didn't bring home the bacon, so to speak. And my health, I think, now is probably better than it was in my 20s because I was smoking a half a pack a day. That grinds you down. Of course, I quit right before my 30s began. I quit in October 2 years ago, right before, a few months before my 30th birthday, actually. By my 30th birthday, it was like I had never smoked a cigarette. My lung function was already a lot better. I think that I'm eating better now than I was in the past. You may have noticed a little bit of weight gain. That's due to proper nutrition, tasty things, as opposed to sitting there smoking, which is an appetite suppressant number one, and then drinking beer for breakfast, which really fuck you up. I mean, yeah, all things considered, at least in my life really did begin at 30. Like, my income started to grow so that now I'm, making ends meet, making headway. I think my success has taken off, certainly, since then. It's almost a seamless overlap, really, because, when the 2016 election happens, I was approaching my 30s. I'm at the end of my 20s. That's sort of when things took off for me, was during that election. Then I turned 30. The income rises, my health improves because I've stopped smoking. I'm not really drinking now. Eating better. And also, it's funny, the only thing I think is worse now is my insomnia. But then again, because of my schedule, I can still get that shut-eye that I need. I just have to, sometimes wake up at noon, be a bitch, but definitely. In my case, life did begin at 30. Now, is this going to be universally the case? No, there are some people, they hit 30 and they're already like, bald and decrepit and stuff, and I can't quite understand it because in some cases these people aren't living a terrible lifestyle. I think it's stress related. I think people, when they have to do like, a thankless like 9 to 5 corporate job or something where they have to screw people for a living, probably it takes a toll on them. At some point, it's just an issue though of their consciousness, their psyche, more I think than their body. Because you got to understand, and this is why placebos work so well. Most complaints that people have aren't due to an underlying genetic disorder or a disease or cancer or anything like that. It's all in their head. It's stress related. Oh, I got headaches, I got cramps and aches and pains. Yes, because you're stressed out, and that stress is affecting other aspects of your behavior. You're medicating it maybe with substances that aren't particularly good for you, cigarettes, booze, whatever, drugs, snort coke up your ass or something. Or chronically not getting enough sleep. You're holding your stress in your shoulders, therefore you've got a backache and stuff. And it's stress related. The underlying, you can treat it symptomatically. I mean, take your Advil or whatever, but really, if you were to take care of the stress, you wouldn't have the problem to begin with. I think that a lot of times people, they go to school in order to get into college. And they go to college to get into their job, and they hit 30 or whatever. And they've been in that job for half a decade or more, and haven't necessarily ascended and gone anywhere. They're still in that same job, and they start maybe losing hope and getting stressed out. A lot of people, I think, abuse their bodies through that methodology, and that's why for them they would start breaking down earlier. In my case, I choose not to do that. I've been criticized by people around me for this, and as I have sort of a devil-may-care attitude. I'm a workaholic who has a devil-may-care attitude. I'm a little bit odd. I'm a little bit of a strange person. Not that that's going to surprise anybody. That's just sort of the way that I am. It's sort of like, and part of it is my spiritual beliefs, honestly. I don't believe in fate, but I do believe in a sort of cosmic guidance, in a sort of loose spiritualist framework. And because of that, I don't worry too much. I figure that if I just work hard, things will generally be okay. Generally, this has worked for me for years and years. This is sort of, when I started becoming successful, was sort of overlapping with a period in which I sort of rediscovered my more spiritualistic beliefs and left behind maybe the hard atheism that I had been part of before, the hard irreligion, the anti-religious fervor that I had before is sort of petered out. I no longer really give a fuck. And I think that definitely helps. And because of maybe that lack of stress, changes to lifestyle at the end of my 20s, again, quitting smoking being the big one, I feel better now than I did when I was a teenager, in all honesty. I feel just fine. I think in my case, definitely life began, if not at 30, in my late 20s, maybe 29 or something. Not saying that'll be the case for everyone, but to all of you young'uns out there, you young whippersnappers worried about aging, probably don't worry too much, because the worry will make you age. So if you just ignore that and say, well, I'm going to live my life, fuck it, you probably age slower. Just don't abuse your body too much. When you're younger, you can get away with more. In all honesty, like if I went back to like smoking and booze and stuff, I'd probably decline in health much more quickly now that I'm older than, someone who's 20. You can get away with a little bit more at that point, but you shouldn't abuse yourself anyway. You eat right, get your fucking exercise. Don't stress too much. Pick a job that you like because you will tend to excel in it more and get ahead more easily, would be another bit of advice. A lot of people, they're like, I can remember, this is a little bit of wisdom for the younger generation. Like, I can remember the college placement sort of stuff, where they would give you advice on what you should study and things like that. Most of it was skill-based as opposed to interest-based. They would ask you sort of like, well, what kind of fields are you interested in? And then they have like laundry lists of different things that you could potentially study. That doesn't necessarily mean an interest in those subjects, though. And they would sort of grade the subjects according to what was more or less desirable. And so they were guiding people towards jobs and in large numbers, thus filling those jobs up quicker and making them less desirable a few years later. The problem is that meant that their guidance became outdated before you graduated. So halfway through your college career, you were thinking about switching majors. It was a really big problem. I can remember like biology was one of the B grade subjects. It was considered relatively up there. There isn't a whole lot of actual competition for hiring people who went into biology at this moment. It's not really so much of a field anymore. It's I think fallen down a couple of ranks. Just the way things work. So don't take their advice too seriously. I was a first-gen college kid, so I didn't have anybody to sort of give me gems of wisdom about these things. Of course, I dropped out. Also a good decision in my case. Probably not in yours, but in my case, yeah, cutting down the amount of debt, definitely. Your stress mounts as you're in debt, even if it's low interest, like student loan debt that can be put on forbearance and shit like that. My stress declines as it's paid down over time. That's definitely the case. Don't get in too much debt. Don't use a credit card. Fuck credit card. Get one, but never use it. Because by getting one, your credit goes up. By not using it, you're saving yourself a hassle. Live below your means. More advice for the whippersnappers out there. Yeah, when you're young, you can actually get away for a few years with living on ramen, so to speak. And if you're saving up that money, then later on, you don't have to live off of ramen. Also, develop your hobbies. Your hobbies can become quite lucrative. Your parents told you to put down the guitar and go and read. Maybe you should take the guitar back up when you have a little more free time. It's probably a good idea. What do you think I did with editing? It was a hobby at first, basically, a labor of love. So yeah, just a little bit of a rant. Yeah, life began at 30 for me. I mean, it's going along pretty well at the moment. Other than all this lockdown bullshit, yeah, unforeseen problems. That's about all. Peace out.